I knew my marriage was in trouble the moment I looked across the table and realized I couldn't remember the last time Derek had truly looked at me. Not a glance, not a passing smile, but looked at me. The way a man sees the woman he fell in love with. That kind of gaze hadn't passed between us in what felt like years. We were strangers sharing a last name, a bed, and a calendar of obligations. So when he asked me no, insisted that I come to this dinner party his boss was throwing, I didn't argue. Not because I wanted to go, but because I wanted to feel wanted again. Even if it was only a borrowed fantasy. Even if I had to play the part of the good wife in front of strangers for one night. I slipped on a black dress that used to make Derek's jaw drop. Tonight, he barely noticed. Just tapped his phone, muttered, "You look nice," and rushed us out the door. Tom's house was a mansion perched on the edge of the city hills, all glass and silence and curated wealth. The kind of place that smelled like white wine and power. I felt small walking into it, like I didn't belong. But Tom made me feel like I did. He welcomed us at the door with an easy smile, his hand lingering a second too long on mine as he introduced himself. His grip was firm, warm, confident. The kind of man who didn't have to try. He knew people would orbit him. He wasn't what I expected. Older than Derek, sure, maybe mid-40s, but handsome in that quiet, dangerous way. Salt and pepper stubble, navy button-down rolled at the sleeves, eyes that saw too much. And when he looked at me, it was with interest, no intention. Dinner started harmlessly enough. There were 8 of us at the long wooden table, colleagues, their partners, laughter bubbling over glasses of Sauvignon Blanc. I smiled when I was supposed to. I nodded through the small talk, but I kept catching Tom's eyes on me. Not leering, not inappropriate, just curious, calm, as if I was a puzzle he already knew how to solve. The air between us thickened as the night wore on. Derek kept drinking, talking over people, dropping names like pebbles in a dry well. I could feel my cheeks flush with embarrassment. I hated when he got like this, too loud, trying too hard. He used to be so self-assured. Now he was just tired. And I was tired of pretending it didn't bother me. When the dinner ended and dessert turned into lounging, Derek sank into the plush white couch beside the fire, his third whiskey in hand. His words slurred as he tried to tell Tom some joke I'd heard a dozen times. Tom humored him politely, but his eyes drifted back to me, always back to me. And then Derek said something that felt like a slap. "Vanessa's always been too much woman for me." He laughed, half drunk, head lolling back. I went still. The room did too, just for a moment. I wanted to scream. Instead, I forced a tight smile. "Ignore him," I said, trying to wave it off. But Tom didn't laugh. He just looked at me with a new kind of awareness, like he'd just been given permission. Later, when Derek had dozed off on the couch, Tom came to sit beside me on the back patio. The city lights stretched out below us, shimmering and silent. I was sipping a glass of red wine, the only thing warming my body. Tom leaned in, not touching me, but close enough that I could feel the heat off his skin. "Can I ask you something?" he said, voice low, almost a whisper. I didn't look at him. "Sure." He waited a beat. "What would you do if someone offered you what your husband can't anymore?" My heart stumbled. I turned to him, laughing nervously, unsure if I'd heard right. He held my gaze. "I mean it," he said. "You're beautiful, Vanessa. Smart, intoxicating, and clearly underappreciated." The way he said my name made me shiver. I should have stood up right then, walked away, shut it down. But I didn't. I stayed frozen, throat tight, cheeks burning. Because deep down, some part of me had been waiting, aching for someone to see me again. To want me. To say I wasn't crazy for feeling invisible. I don't know what you mean, I whispered, even though I did. Oh, I knew exactly what he meant. His eyes flicked to my lips. You do. Then, without another word, he stood and walked back inside, leaving me with the view and the quiet thrum of something dangerous opening inside me. That night, lying beside Derek in bed while he snored, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying Tom's voice in my head. What would you do? And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't sure I had an answer. I wish I could say I walked away after that night, that I shut down whatever was starting to burn in me and went back to my normal life, to my marriage, to the version of myself that never would have let something like that happen. But the truth is, I didn't walk away. I couldn't. Something had shifted in me, cracked open in the quiet of that rooftop patio when Tom spoke those words. I kept thinking about the way he looked at me, how he saw the parts of me Derek had stopped noticing years ago. I spent that entire weekend pretending everything was fine, cleaning the house, folding laundry, making small talk about errands and grocery lists, all while Tom's words kept echoing in my chest like a second heartbeat. On Sunday afternoon, Derek was asleep on the couch again, headphones in, phone buzzing every few minutes with messages from work, and I realized I hadn't been really touched in weeks. No spontaneous kisses, no hand on my lower back, no hungry glances across the room, just passing gestures, the kind you give someone you live with but no longer long for. That night, after pretending to fall asleep beside him, I slipped out of bed, walked barefoot to the kitchen, and stared at my phone. The message was still there, the one Tom had sent the day after the dinner. If you ever want more, you know how to reach me. I don't even remember typing it, just a blur of nerves and heat and recklessness, but I wrote back, "What do you mean by more?" My fingers hovered over the screen after I hit send, half hoping he wouldn't answer, half dreading that he would. But he did, instantly. "Let me show you." That was it. No pressure, no elaboration, just a door, quietly opened, waiting for me to decide whether or not to step through it. I wish I could say I wrestled with it longer, that I thought about the consequences, the betrayal, the guilt, but the truth is, I was already past the point of no return. I met him at a boutique hotel on the edge of town, where no one we knew would be. I told Derek I had a late client dinner, something I'd never done before, which made the lie feel safer somehow, like I had earned it. When I walked into the hotel lobby and saw Tom waiting for me, dressed simply but sharply, his phone in one hand, the other in his pocket, I felt like a character in someone else's story. He looked up, met my eyes, and smiled, not cocky, not smug, but certain, like he already knew I'd come. The elevator ride was silent, and when the doors closed, the tension became unbearable. I could hear my pulse in my ears. When we reached a room, he opened the door, stepped aside, and let me walk in first. The space was warm and dim, golden light washing over soft sheets and low music humming from somewhere. I stood frozen for a second, heart slamming against my ribs, my fingers trembling. I turned to face him, about to say something I don't even know what, but he crossed the room and kissed me. It wasn't a question. It wasn't gentle. It was a man claiming something he'd already decided belonged to him. And I let him. God, I let him. His hands were strong and certain, sliding over my skin like they'd been there before in another life. We didn't talk much. There wasn't time for words. My body answered questions I hadn't dared speak out loud for years. And when it was over, when we lay tangled together in silence, the guilt finally started to creep in. I turned on my side, facing the wall, eyes wide and wet, while Tom lit a cigarette and stared at the ceiling like this was routine for him. Maybe it was. For me, it was the most exhilarating, terrifying thing I'd ever done. I dressed slowly, still in a daze, still not fully believing what had just happened. When I checked my phone, there was a message from Derek. Just one line. "Home early, missed you tonight." My stomach dropped. I could feel the floor tilt beneath me. I looked at Tom, who was watching me now, quiet and unreadable. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded too quickly. "Yeah, just tired." He smirked like he didn't believe me, but didn't push. As I left, he touched my hand and said, "You'll come back. I can tell." And the worst part, I knew he was right. I drove home in silence, heart pounding, hands trembling on the wheel, the scent of him still clinging to my clothes. When I walked in, Derek was asleep on the couch again. I stood there for a long time, just looking at him. My husband, the man I used to adore, and I felt nothing. No anger, no affection, just a deep, aching emptiness. I walked to the bathroom, locked the door, and cried into a towel, silent, guilty, and more alive than I'd felt in years. I told myself I could stop any time, that it was just a phase, something impulsive and thrilling that would burn itself out like a storm and leave nothing behind. I lied to myself, to Derek, to everyone. The truth was, once I crossed that line with Tom, I couldn't stop. I didn't want to. I craved him, his attention, his hands, the way he looked at me like I was something forbidden and irresistible. It wasn't just about sex, though God, the sex was blinding. It was about feeling alive again, desired, seen. And yet, every time I returned home to Derek, washed my skin raw in the shower, crawled into bed beside the man I had once built my life with, I felt the weight of it all pressing on my chest like something sharp and heavy. I thought I was good at hiding it. I smiled when I was supposed to, cooked dinner, asked about his day, let him pretend that things were slowly getting better between us. I even told myself that maybe somehow Tom was the outlet I needed to keep my marriage going, like siphoning off the ache into a secret world would make room for healing at home. But lies have a way of leaking through the cracks. I should have known. I did know. One night, after yet another stolen afternoon with Tom at a rented loft near the lake, I came home to find Derek sitting at the kitchen table in the dark. No TV on, no music, just a glass of scotch in front of him and my phone in his hand. My stomach dropped so fast it felt like free fall. I opened my mouth to speak, to lie, but the look on his face shut me down. He wasn't angry, not in the way I expected. He looked hollow, betrayed in a way that said he'd been hurting long before he ever saw those messages. "How long?" he asked, voice raw. I froze. "Derek, how long, Vanessa?" I felt the floor disappear beneath me. "A couple months," I whispered, but he closed his eyes. That hurt more than yelling would have. "I trusted you," he said, "even when things got hard. Even when I was exhausted and distant, I never stopped trusting you." I wanted to cry. I wanted to fall at his feet and scream that I was sorry, that I didn't mean to fall so far. But what would be the point? I'd already burned everything down. "I didn't mean for it to happen," I said, tears finally sliding down my cheeks. I was lonely. You were gone all the time. You stopped seeing me. I felt invisible." He nodded slowly, like he'd already had this conversation 1,000 times in his head. "And Tom, of all people," his voice cracked, "he's not who you think he is, Vanessa. You're not the first woman he's done this with." My heart slammed against my ribs. "What? You think you're special to him? That he hasn't slept with other colleagues' wives? You're a game to him, a power play." I staggered back a step, heat rising to my face, not anger, but shame. I wanted to argue, to defend it, but deep down, I knew Derek was right. Tom had always been just a little too smooth, a little too confident. He made me feel like I was the only one. But no, I couldn't ignore the truth buried beneath his charm. I collapsed into the chair across from Derek, too wrecked to speak. I loved you, he said after a long silence. Even when I didn't show it the right way. I was trying to provide, to make sure we were okay. But I never imagined you'd turn to him. I stared at my hands. The ring on my finger felt like it was burning my skin. I didn't plan it, I whispered. I just felt like I was drowning. He stood up. Yeah, well, you didn't just drown. You pulled us both under. And with that, he walked out. Just like that. No suitcase. No dramatic slam of the door, just a quiet goodbye that hit harder than any fight ever could. I sat there for hours, numb. I couldn't even bring myself to cry. Later that night, I texted Tom, not even knowing what I wanted. Comfort, explanation, something to hold on to. I wrote, "Did you know Derek found out?" He replied within minutes. Was bound to happen. You okay? That was it. No regret, no apology, no real concern. And suddenly, the illusion shattered. He wasn't my escape. He wasn't my salvation. He was just a man who liked breaking things he couldn't keep. I stared at his message until my screen went dark. And in that silence, I realized I had lost everything. Derek's love, my own self-respect, and worst of all, the naive belief that I could have it all without consequence. The affair hadn't just broken my marriage, it had broken me. The weeks that followed were a blur of silence, numb mornings, and too many nights spent lying awake with my heart caught in the space between regret and denial. Derek moved out. 2 days after our confrontation, just a duffel bag and a man who didn't owe me any more words. No shouting, no begging, just a quiet devastation of someone who had loved deeply and finally decided to stop bleeding for it. I kept waiting for the crash, for the panic or the begging or some dramatic unraveling. But that never came. Instead, it was worse, it was empty. Days slipped into each other, and even though I was technically free now, I'd never felt more caged. I tried going back to work, pretending things were normal, telling people Derek was traveling for work, and smiling too tightly every time someone asked when they'd see us together again. I told myself I still had Tom, that maybe what we had wasn't just an escape, that maybe there was something real, there's something I could build from the wreckage. But deep down, I already knew that wasn't true. After Derek left, I met with Tom twice. The first time, I showed up at the loft with mascara smudged under my eyes and heartbreak hanging off my shoulders like wet clothes. He kissed me, murmured sweet nothings, tried to make me forget. And for a moment, I did. But afterward, as I lay on the sheets with his hand lazily tracing circles on my thigh, I asked him what we were doing. He didn't look at me, just reached for a cigarette, lit it, and exhaled. We're enjoying each other, he said, like it was the simplest truth in the world. That was the moment it clicked for me. He never planned on loving me. I wasn't someone he wanted a life with. I was a beautiful distraction, an experiment in temptation, a trophy he'd stolen from a man he probably envied in some twisted way. The second and final time I saw him, I told him it was over. He didn't protest. He didn't chase. Just shrugged and said, "Didn't think you'd last." And something inside me shattered, not because I wanted him to fight for me, but because I finally saw myself through his eyes, disposable, replaceable, a chapter in a book he'd already finished. I left that loft and didn't look back. I went home and tore the sheets off my bed, threw out the wine glasses we used, and stood under scalding water in the shower until my skin turned red. But the shame wouldn't wash off. The guilt clung to me like a second skin. What haunted me most wasn't just the affair, it was the memory of who I used to be. The woman who believed in loyalty, in forgiveness, in slow, quiet love. I missed her more than I missed Derek. The woman I'd become restless, reckless, aching for validation. She was a stranger I didn't know how to look in the eye anymore. And yet, in the wreckage, something strange began to grow. Clarity. Not peace. Not yet. But understanding. I started therapy. I told the truth. I stopped sugarcoating my choices and sat with the ugly parts of myself, the ones I'd kept hidden even from me. I wrote Derek a letter I never sent, pages and pages of confessions, apologies, and the things I never had the courage to say. While we were together, how I missed the way his laugh used to sound in the middle of the night. How I remembered every tiny detail of the first time he told me he loved me. How sorry I was that I stopped fighting for us long before the affair ever began. It wasn't an excuse, just the truth. I didn't expect him to forgive me. I still don't. I don't know where he is now, whether he started dating, whether he still thinks of me when certain songs play, or if he's managed to forget me entirely. Maybe that's what I deserve. But every now and then, when the guilt loosens its grip and the self-hatred softens, I think about the girl I used to be, the one who wanted so badly to be seen and touched and loved that I destroyed the very thing that once held me. And I forgive her. Just a little. Because she was lost. And broken. And human. And even humans who betray can still be redeemed. Maybe not with the people they've hurt, but within themselves. These days, I live smaller, quieter. I still wear the black dress sometimes alone in the mirror, just to remind myself that desire doesn't always mean destruction. I've learned how to sit with my own reflection without flinching. I'm still learning. Healing isn't pretty. It's not linear. It's a mess of progress and pain and starting over 1,000 times. But I'm doing it alone for now. And maybe that's exactly what I needed all along, not to be touched or saved or wanted by someone else, but to finally choose me after all the damage I've done, after all the people I lost. And somehow, in that quiet choice, I've started finding pieces of myself again.